The following program contains many scenes in black and white. Please do not adjust your set. You're about to look back at TV the way it used to be on New England's original TV station. And now, Cy Yanoff, General Manager of WBZ-TV.
Good evening. 30 years ago tonight, New England got its first television station, WBZ-TV. For those of us that were growing up in the Boston area, it was the 20th century's second great fantasy come true. First, the Wright brothers flew through the air. Then we learned to make pictures fly through the air. It was Buck Rogers, and it was real. Television itself was just an infant when WBZ-TV first went on the air. In just 3 decades, we've become a New England tradition. Now that we're 30, it's time to look back at the moments we shared and the friends we've made growing up in New England.
Post-war Boston, radio was still king. Television, well, that was something we'd heard of, but very few of us had seen. Even in this age of miracles, it seemed pretty far away, but it was a lot closer than we thought. Over at WBZ Radio, they were already making plans for a new broadcast center on Soldiers Field Road. Something was in the air besides radio in New England. They already had television down in New York. They proved it worked way before the war. Now they were working on getting it up to us. Bouncing it up by airplane relay was just one possibility. But the phone company had a better idea. Microwave radio relay across 7 hilltops between New York and Boston. The question was, would it work? Could they actually send us pictures all the way from New York? These men believed they could. Bill Swartley, Bill Hauser, Gordon Swan, all from WBZ Radio. They were laying the cornerstone for New England's first television center when the microwave relay was ready, and they couldn't wait to give it a try. December 5th, 1947, the first test in the old Hotel Bradford studios, where a few lucky people saw Joe Louis fight Jersey Joe Walcott from Madison Square Garden in living black and white. The microwave relay system worked one way. Would it work the other? January 22nd, 1948, the second test. Together with our network, NBC, we telecast live from Commonwealth Pier in Boston back across the 7 hilltops to New York. New York saw the Fish Pier in action, though it might have been difficult to distinguish the real snow falling on the pier from the snow on the airwaves. The microwave relay system worked both ways, and suddenly a lot of people began to see the possibilities. Bill Swartley, WBZ-TV's first general manager, remembers.
We wanted to be the first in New England. We had made a commitment to ourselves we were going to be, and we wanted to see it through. And you say, well, what would hold you up? Well, if you've ever tried to build a house, was it completed on time?
Plans to be on the air with regularly scheduled broadcasts by March were thwarted by the worst winter in years. You couldn't build a 650-foot tower in snow and high winds. But then you couldn't wait too long if you wanted to be first either. And being first was a BZ tradition. New England's first radio station was determined to be first in TV. It seemed to take forever to get that tower up. Finally, there it was, the tallest man-made structure in New England. The dream was about to come true. WBZ-TV was going to be first. June 9th, 1948. At 10 in the morning, WBZ-TV was on the air with what was to be the staple of our programming day, the test pattern. At 1 o'clock, more test pattern. At 4 o'clock, still more test pattern. At 6:30, the moment we've been waiting for, WBZ-TV went on the air with New England's first regularly scheduled programming, a film of prominent New Englanders wishing us well.
Congratulate station WBZ-TV for inaugurating the service of television in this area. To all of us, it'll be a happy medium for pleasant and profitable activities.
The Honorable James M. Curley, Mayor of the City of Boston.
In the past quarter of a century, the two most important contributions to the happiness, peace of mind, contentment of the American people have unquestionably been the Ford car and the radio. Today, a third contribution, perhaps equaling in value either of the previous two, is going to become a part of the life of the American people, namely television.
With this new instrumentality of television, we all will be able to see and to be inspired by the great teachers of religion all throughout the world, giving the contagion of their personal examples for the good life. I join with all of my friends and with my colleagues particularly on this first broadcast in the prayer that this new invention of human genius shall be used for the blessing of all and the hurt of none, for the joy of all and the woe of none.
The other day, I had the privilege of inspecting the new John Hancock building and saw from its height the harbor, the ocean, the streets, the railroads, the buildings, the Charles River.
This film, made several days before the broadcast, was followed by a live telecast of Governor Bradford from our old studios because our new broadcast center wasn't exactly finished. Arch McDonald, who did the news that first night, remembers.
While we were preparing for the news, these saws were going and the hammers were pounding. And all of a sudden, we realized it was time for news. So I screamed and hollered for quiet on the set, real big stuff. And so everybody stopped hammering, everybody stopped sawing. And we didn't have any furniture. There wasn't any furniture in the building because they were still constructing the place. So we had a piece of plywood, and I sat on a keg of nails, and that's how the station got on the air. McDonald sitting on a keg of nails, a little uncomfortable, but we made it.
It wasn't until several weeks later that WBZ Radio and TV moved out of the Hotel Bradford and into the new broadcast center. It was the finest facility of its kind just about anywhere. Ultra-modern was the word for the 7 spacious studios. There were 4 cameras, a special projector for broadcasting films, the latest equipment for the finest quality pictures. And then there was our sleek mobile van, completely fitted out for remote telecast by microwave. By that time, WBZ-TV acquired a competitor, and we'd begun to have our critics. Anthony LaCamera of the Boston Herald remembers.
And I was assistant city editor of the Sunday Advertiser when television came along in Boston. And I suggested to my managing editor after a few months that, hey, we really should have a local television column because things are happening. And I was interested because I had always liked theater and films and pop music and radio. And he said, fine. He said, why don't you do it? And that's exactly what I had wanted him to say, except that he said, do it on the side. And maybe for 2 years I was doing it on the side. But as the medium kept growing, the column kept growing too.
Just about everyone loved TV. That is, everyone who had a TV. With only 2,300 TV sets to receive us when we first went on the air, getting more sets out and around became a big priority. There was the inevitable contest. Huge crowds at Mechanics Hall watched breathlessly as an 18-year-old ballerina from Brookline, Massachusetts, won the title of Miss Television. Phyllis Pond Nair remembers.
Not only did I win the contest, which was the start of my career, but I also won the first television set in Boston, which made me very, very popular. All the neighbors used to come over every night and watch our TV set. It was a very unique experience for them because most of them didn't own one and had never seen it.
For the rest of us, all those ads in the papers were pretty hard to resist. We were promised the world right in our living rooms, carefully concealed in a piece of elegant furniture. The screen was a little small and the price was a little high, but that didn't stop New England's love affair with TV.
Introducing America's #1 television star, your Easter present, Milton Berle.
Everyone wanted to see Uncle Milty live from New York and to see their own friends and neighbors on a new show called Community Auditions, live from Soldiers Field Road. In the fall of '48, Gillette put 100 TV sets out in the Boston Public Garden so 10,000 fans could see the Braves in the series on WBZ-TV. If anything sold TV to New England, it was sports. If you couldn't get to your college football game, WBZ-TV brought it to you. And if you couldn't get out to the baseball game, well, just imagine, right in your own living room, the splendid Splinter himself.
What made Ted Williams so great was a burning pride. A pride to be the best hitter that ever lived, a pride to excel and to pursue his craft more than any athlete I've ever known. Ted Williams could have been a drunk and hit 300. He was so natural, but he took himself into the outer barrier beyond of work and practice and seeking perfection.
Kurt Gowdy came up from New York in '51 to become the voice of baseball in Boston.
We had only 3 cameras to start with, one in back of home plate, one in back of first, one in back of third. 3 or 4 years later, they wanted to put the center field camera in. I remember Joe Cronin had a big argument. He thought that center field camera picture was too good, that the fans would stay home instead of coming to Fenway Park. You could see the catcher's signs. You could see everything from the center field camera. Finally, Joe relented, and they put the center field camera in, and we had 4 television cameras to do the Red Sox game.
In those early days, practically everything was a TV first. Way back in '48, NBC gave us our first look at a political convention, live from Philadelphia. WBZ-TV gave NBC a first in 1949, live from Boston Garden, Winston Churchill's first television appearance. Filmed at the same time by cameramen from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, on whose behalf he was speaking.
Let us then move forward together in discharge of our mission and our duty, fearing God and nothing else.
Two months later, another first. WBZ-TV's first birthday. And by now there were 50,000 TV sets in Greater Boston alone. And WBZ-TV was on its way to becoming part of every New England family. Next, We're 4 looks back on the fabulous 50s. The faces we saw first on WBZ-TV may not have been familiar, but the voices were. We knew them from BZ Radio. Arch McDonald, Carl D'Souza, host of Carl's Surprise Package, New England's first live children's show. Lindy Miller, comedian, newsman, host of Lindy's Lounge and countless other early TV shows. Arthur Amadon, singer, newsman, moderator of New England's first panel show, starring the editors, and later host of Boston Movie Time. TV was as new to them as it was to us, as Arthur Amadon and Lindy Miller remember.
To be live on camera
was scary, that's what it was.
Well, not only that, but I remember I used to get butterflies in my stomach every time I'd hear that theme song, whether it was on that particular program. I mean, you know, then you'd start to clear your throat, and I mean, quietly. And the minute those lights would come on,
that was it. Being live just drew out the best in the talent. It had to be good, and it just had to be good the first time.
In the confusion of those early days of live TV, it was sometimes hard to keep your signal straight.
One of our early weathermen, very scientific type, really knew the weather, but show business he wasn't quite sure about. And he was instructed in all the signals, the stretch signals and the time signals, and he was on camera, and again, this was live, and he's getting a very strange signal, and he can't figure it out. Little did he know that he was standing there with his zipper wide open, and he'd never seen that signal before.
Eileen Neeland, another local radio personality, had heard there was a need for children's programs on television.
Well told.
She was among the first to respond to the challenge.
I sat up all night doing a script, and I mailed it to TV4. 24 hours later, it was back again. Not visual enough. Well, that was when I called Ted Miller. He was a cartoonist, and I decided that I'd call him the Crayon Man.
Say, mister, I've got an idea. My dad told me once, if I knew something that was news, I should take it to the newspaper.
Go right ahead, Sonny, but I don't think it'll do any good.
Well, 5 minutes later, Sam was at the city desk, and the next day, he himself was calling the headlines.
The show was called The Lady of the Bookshelf. Children loved it, and so did the critics. But it was hard work. Not only did you have to find the stories and bring them alive with pictures, you also had to do the commercials live.
Amazo instant dessert. Amazo the magic word. And your magic wand? Why, of course, it's Mother's egg beater. Just add Amazo to milk, beat for 30 seconds, and presto. You have a silken smooth, yummy pudding. One that's delightfully flavored. And boys and girls, there's extra fun in every package of Amazo now. A magic trick card, which you can do.
In 1952, a great broadcast pioneer came back to New England, where he'd been the subject of the first simultaneous transmission of picture and sound way back in 1930, before there were any sets to receive him. But there were plenty of sets to receive him now. His name was Bob Emery, and we knew him as Big Brother. And he knew what all us small fry wanted.
The one thing that children have always seemed to want of a personality in either radio or television is to be with him, to love him, somebody to love. Children are full of love. They just got too much of it.
Bob Emery's contributions to television and to the kids of New England became legend. His work with the Jimmy Fund raised thousands and thousands of dollars. He also got thousands and thousands of kids to salute the flag and drink milk.
It seemed to me that it's a natural way to get the children to drink milk on the air as an example to children at home. And how to do it? A toast to the president. So I had a picture of each president as they came along, and I drank a lot of milk. They drank a lot of milk. And I have all kinds of comments about whether I drank milk or not, but I did, so there.
In 1956, still another pioneer in children's programming rode into town. He'd been a rodeo star, an entertainer, and Gabby Hayes had told him he was great with kids. The question was, would a cowboy show be popular in New England? There were skeptics, as Rex Traylor remembers.
Well, I was invited to come to Boston to participate in a television show and at Channel 4, and I called some of my friends in the Boston area, and they said there had been other attempts to have Western shows in the area, and they just didn't go. So I said, well, I'll come up and give it a try, and everybody said, well, you'll be lucky if it lasts 6 months and a year at the most. However, as it turns out, we were on the air for 18 years on Channel 4.
With his first sidekick, Pablo, played by veteran television actor Dick Kilbride, Rex Traylor invented the character later known as Cactus Pete. He was an old man who lived in a mine shaft, and he didn't exactly know his way around town.
We had a little adventure that Pablo and I used to do, where the old man would come out of the mine and then get lost all over the city of Boston and have great adventures. And the kids really got wrapped up in this because he was lost in the city of Boston for almost a year. And kids would call up the station and get very excited and write us letters that they spotted the old man on Boston Common, down on Tremont Street, on Washington Street, no matter where they found him. Any man with an old beard was the old man we were looking for.
Boomtown's greatest innovation resulted from its need for more room than a studio could provide. So, Boomtown moved outdoors, first to the old MDC trotting track on Soldiers Field Road, and then to a special set behind the studios. Looking at it, you'd think you were in Hollywood instead of Boston.
It was a Western town. It was a practical Western town. It was right out behind the studio. It was like the movie lot of MGM or 20th Century Fox. Looked like an actual Western town. Had a general store, the Boomtown Opera House, a hotel, Boomtown Hotel, balcony and all. We had a barn in which we stabled Gold Rush, my horse, and it worked out beautifully. For many years, we had that Western town out behind the studio. Unfortunately, a tribe of local Indians decided to have a raid
on the western town one night, and they burned it down. And it came to a pitiful end. However, that was after about 10 years of the set being out there. It was never rebuilt, much to my sorrow. It would have been far more expensive to rebuild it, as it was back during the time we built it originally. And we had some great times out there.
By the mid-50s, WBZ-TV had become the entertainment center of New England. The showpiece was Swan Boat, New England's first hour-long live morning variety program. Swan Boat had something for everyone. The captain was host Nelson Bragg. The crew featured singers Lindy Doherty and Cindy Lord, home economist Polly Hughes, Dick Kilbride, and Miss Nancy, a baby girl who wasn't expected to do much on the show except grow older. Mike DiNapoli and his band. Just about every star who visited Boston visited Swan Boat. On June 9, 1955, WBZ-TV's 7th birthday, Swan Boat was broadcast live to New York, where films were made of these historic moments.
Okay, let's hear it. There's just one way to handle a woman. Man, you just gotta treat him rough. Slap him. Yeah. We gotta show him who wears the pants and cut out that sissy stuff. Now it ain't no use to take abuse whenever they are cranky or cross. Let's put the women in their place and we'll show them who is boss. Open up the doghouse. Open up the doghouse. Over, move it over. Two cats are coming in. Move over.
Say, Nelson, I've had a request.
You have?
From a guy who left here the last time I was here.
Yeah.
To play a fiddle number, so would it be all right if I went over there and
You
played
brought
now?
the fiddle?
Yeah, I brought
Good, by all means.
I didn't trust it with anyone else.
Yeah.
I'll just walk over there and play
yeah.
it for you. Can I have my introduction now, please? But you can.
Yeah,
Thank you so
young
much.
man with the fiddle.
Say, you want to get a guy crazy? Send him a telegram saying, ignore first wire. All you married men, you want to get your wife a little nervous? When you go to bed tonight, don't talk in your sleep. Just grin.
Jack Chase, boy. Good morning, Nelson. Good morning. This is the time we keep pace with Chase, the news of the day on Swan Boat.
Nelson, you know this...
Jack Chase was also regular on Swan Boat. Every morning he'd saunter onto the set and casually ad-lib the news.
Special masses are being held today over there in Worcester for the persons who were victims of that tragedy. There were, as you recall, 97 persons killed in the disaster, and over 1,300 were hospitalized, and of course about 12,000 were left homeless by that disaster.
New England had already begun to count on WBZ-TV for innovations in news. There were many more to come. An ill wind blows no good for New England. As We're 4, looking back at 30, continues.
For the cornerstone laying, Soldiers Field Road, I went out, did the thing, looked at that big tower. There's a big tripod tower over the building. Went home that night and I said to my wife, boy, I hope I'm never in this building in a high wind.
It started out as just another rainy day in the summer of '54. But the man who pioneered professional weather broadcasting in New England knew what was coming.
That morning I said very, very definitely that this storm center looked to me like it was coming closer in over land than the government forecast indicated. The government forecast that morning, incidentally, was northeast gales along the New England coast, and a northeast gale doesn't bother us a bit, maybe a rough sea, and that's all. To me, it looked like the storm, based on late reports I had got, indicated the storm center was going to come up over Providence and move to the west of Boston. And when a hurricane moves west of you, you get the danger sector, and that's where the damage. So I remember clearly that morning saying that by noon today, we're going to have hurricane conditions on a line east, over and east of a line from Providence to Boston, meaning southeastern New England would have lots of destruction.
Jack Chase was doing the noon news when Hurricane Carol hit full force.
We knew the hurricane was coming and that he was headed for Boston. So I checked with Bill Hauser, our chief engineer, and said, what's our tower stress for? He says 100 miles an hour. I called Blue Hill Observatory, said, what kind of gust you got? He says 101. So I went to Wendy Davis, our producer. I said, you know, this is a risky situation. I said, can we stick a camera out the back door and just have it on the tower? Because it was swaying. This giant steel mass was just swaying 12, 15 feet either way. He thought it was a good idea, and I had some film footage of flood situations. I said, anytime the tower sways, just go to that live, and I'll see it on the monitor, and I'll just describe what happened. That was the last anybody saw of our tower, because I finished the newscast, which was 10 minutes long, went out to the hall to get a drink of water before filing my news, and the tower crashed in on the top of the building. Water came cascading down the stairway.
The WBZ tower was in ruins, like much of the rest of New England. Using a temporary small tower, WBZ-TV was back on the air in time to report on the damage. We had to be. People were counting on us.
They knew that they could depend on a guy like Kent. They could depend on people like Chase and depend on other newsmen that were in there. Somehow, those people continued to work. And the people knew, who were watching us and listening to us, that this was the case, and they were so thoroughly indoctrinated and became so dependent and became so much a part of the family that when they were in trouble, they just automatically turned toward the group. And that group never let them down.
We covered it all, from Hurricanes Carol and Edna to the whirlwind career of a young senator on his way up. Under the guidance of pioneer news director Denny Whitmarsh, cameramen in 5 states, or stringers as they were called, risked life and limb to bring the story in first.
BZ had a tremendous audience and still does, because they had stringers, so-called, all over New England. You had cameraman, reporter in Vermont, Maine, up in the western part of the state, in Worcester, in Rhode Island, in New Hampshire. Denny Whitmarsh, God bless him, developed probably the most effective stringer system in the history of television, I would say.
January 1955. Another first for WBZ-TV News. Inmates at Charlestown Prison try to escape, then hold their guards hostage for 84 hours. WBZ-TV covers it all live as New England and the nation watch and wait. And the only reporter to get the inside story is WBZ-TV's Jack Chase.
Wanting to get better coverage of the Cherry Hill incident, I borrowed a fireman's uniform, hat and coat. I didn't bother with the pants because I didn't have time. And I did bluff my way past a couple of guards who were armed with submachine guns, but I carried it a little bit too far, apparently, because at the 3rd guardhouse, I was challenged by a guard who put a gun in my stomach and says, "March, the warden wants to talk to you." So I went down and picked up the phone, and I figured the best defense in my case is a good offense. So I said, "Warden, unless you get these people off my back, I'm going to pull a plug on these lights up here." He said, "Oh, wait a minute." He said, "Well, I have to admit I'm a little suspicious because they tell me you got gray flannel pants." I said, "Well, they called me out of bed." I said, "This is an emergency detail." I said, "What are you going to do about it?" He said, "Oh, hold your horses." He said, he spoke to the guard and called him off. 10 minutes later, I'd gone back through the guards, and I was on the network giving what I called the bird's eye view of Cherry Hill, and I was the only reporter during the whole insurrection that actually got on the wall overlooking Cherry Hill.
This is a brand new, shiny, two-toned 1957 automobile. During the next half hour, a driver will crash this car as a demonstration of safety techniques developed by science.
1957. WBZ-TV was approaching its 10th birthday. It seemed the right time to leave something to posterity. A time capsule designed to be opened in 2000 A.D. The man behind the capsule was Dr. Jonathan Karras.
Well, we sort of got together a group of things which we thought represented, this, remember, is June 23rd, 1957, almost 20 years ago, that represents sort of the humanity at the time. And there are safety pins in there and some aspirin tablets. a man's nylon stocking, potato peeler, plastic measuring cup, can opener, and a mouse trap, and the Holy Bible, and a whole bunch of letters from people like the president of General Motors and auspicious politicians, etc. And the somewhat marvelous thing is I put a letter in myself trying to predict what would happen when they opened this capsule and what life would be like. So we loaded up the capsule in the studio, went outside to the front, and the reason for the ropes that you see is because there's a radioactive marker in it, because if in the intervening years the parking lot gets dug up or WBZ disappears in some kind of Holocaust or something, you could, by means of some kind of a nuclear detector, find this capsule. And there's a radioactive marker there, which is why it's labeled. And it's in this little cement vault with a little glass over it. And if you go to BZ right now and you look out front, there's a marker and it says to be opened in the year 2000. So it's still there. I mean, I saw it just last week.
At the time, John Karras was host of a show called 2000 AD, a show that made a whole lot of television history.
In the beginning, the idea of 2000 AD was to try and do some things that were unusual. There's a lot of talent around Boston, a lot of scientific capability. And I remember one of the earliest things we did in about April or so of '57 was we were the first television station in the world to transmit a television picture on a beam of light. Now that was electronically very hard to do at that time, and in fact, here is the picture of my much more youthful head. First image ever transmitted on a beam of light.
But no studio was big enough for what Dr. Karras came up with next.
And we started to do some fairly grandiose, one-of-a-kind things.
I presume you can still hear
Walk through fire. We had special suits and took a big porterhouse steak and cooked it live on fire with us in the suits.
We should have gotten a minute steak. What? We should have had a minute steak. Oh, put it over a little more. It's coming. I think we should have demonstrated that these suits are fine for fire protection. Perfectly comfortable. Well, there you are. Fine. This is hardly, whoops.
We went up to Suffolk Downs and did a program on automobile safety. Bought a brand new Chevrolet with 60 miles on it.
People know what they're doing there. He's doing a lot more than 38 here now. Oh, actually, certainly is.
Rolled it live twice, wheel to wheel.
Tremendous. My goodness. He's perfect. The fire engine is there.
Now, the guy gets out at the end. And now when I'm reviewing, I'm wondering what would have happened, if that fellow had not gotten out at the end. We're on live television, no retakes and all.
Another live demonstration at Suffolk Downs showed what would happen if a car struck a school bus. Dummies were used, and a getaway vehicle for the driver of the crash car.
Beautifully done. There it goes. Now, let's take a look. Let's go out there. The dummy, there's one of the children. Was he sitting in the back originally? She was on the back with a safety harness on her. The seats are completely crushed up against the steering post here. Right. The child is embedded into the dashboard. And I think it should be a very interesting ride.
And then there was the famous tractor demonstration. Dr. Karras may go down in automotive history for what he did to cars on 2000 AD.
What the might of such a machine can do. This, needless to say, is a tremendous ride. Very good. I think, go ahead, back up. I think there's no question about the fact that this 35-ton Caterpillar, drop the blade on it. Drop the blade. That's the idea.
Then an event occurred that rocked the scientific world.
Sputnik went up, and everyone's sort of running around trying to get a picture of whatever this thing is, up in the air somewhere. No known ways to do that, and I got a call. We knew a lot of people in the Boston area, scientists, because we've been at this a long time. Got a telephone call from someone in the lab who said, how would you like to get a picture of Sputnik in orbit? I said, that's a very funny joke, and how's everything? No, he said, no, seriously. And he said, well, Down in Baltimore, in a Knoll barn, we have a special camera which is used to track sodium vapor in the upper atmosphere. And sodium vapor lights up there. It gives a yellow radiation. So this camera is very sensitive to very dim light. He says, you know, Sputnik goes by, it reflects light. If we knew where to look, and we happened to be calibrating the camera at 5 o'clock in the morning by accident, gee, maybe we might get a picture. I said, beautiful. And there's also a Westinghouse station in Baltimore. So we sent a photographer out, and now we have to find out where's Sputnik. So we go over to Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, where Fred Whipple was the head of it. He's now the emeritus head, and J.L. Hynek, who I think everyone has heard of because he was the technical advisor to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. J.L. Hynek was at Smithsonian then. They had tracked Sputnik. So they called Baltimore, told them where to accidentally point the camera. So every morning for 3 or 4 mornings, this camera went out. There's a video output on this camera. And about the 3rd or 4th day, they get this little dot of light going across. A motion picture of Sputnik 1 in orbit before anyone in the world had a still picture. Remember, 20 years ago now, October 57 we're talking about. So we got on the NBC News. We had this footage on NBC, and everyone got mad because I guess BZ wouldn't let them have the film. We had it sort of first.
The Russians weren't the only ones to make great scientific achievements in 1957. That was the year that WBZ-TV ushered in a new era in television reception. This masterpiece of modern engineering out in Needham stood 1,349 feet, the tallest structure in New England. Technology and television moved into the modern era. The world was getting smaller. WBZ-TV news and documentary teams were covering stories around the globe. When Archbishop Cushing was elevated to Cardinal in Rome, former WBZ-TV reporter Rod McLeish was there. Arch MacDonald was with the Cardinal when he visited Ireland.
So I was shooting footage with our camera crew and going through the crowds of Cork, and suddenly the Cardinal stopped the car, and he stood up in the car, and this was just before his 70th birthday. And so he said to everybody in the crowd, "If you want to be on television in America, you are." And he said, "You know, my 70th birthday is coming up." So he stood up in the car, and everybody started to sing "Happy Birthday," and Cardinal Cushing was leading them in the car. "Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me." And as he said, he had a foghorn voice and a Johnny One Note, but everybody knew exactly what that note was because they all joined in. And it reverberated all over Cork. Happy birthday to Cardinal Cushing.
Some of the great leaders of the time came to visit us. On election eve, 1952, Ike had just finished broadcasting from the BZ studios when a clock fell on his head. A slight wound, but a great embarrassment to all concerned. In '59, we got a look at another leader as WBZ-TV camera crews joined forces with NBC for a special broadcast from Soldiers Field Stadium. It was the first time that most of us had seen a guest of honor. WBZ-TV was also turning its cameras on its own community to spotlight little-known local problems. Innovative techniques were developed to dramatize these problems. Reporter Jim Jensen took Assignment Prison, a program aimed at the rising crime rate, as an opportunity to show us firsthand just what it was like to be arrested and imprisoned in the State Correctional Institution at Walpole. This was an era of powerful, dramatic documentaries. City in a Shadow dramatized the problem of urban decay so effectively that it won the coveted Sigma Delta Chi Award.
But things just ain't the same. It used to be just houses. First they let in stores, then a bar moved in. Then the auto repair shop come in and storing old lumber and old cars and everything else there. Things haven't been the same since.
those who can move, for a shadow has crept across this place. Poorly equipped cold water flats, congestion, no place for children to play, no schools nearby, commercial and industrial activities crowding in, heavy traffic. These are the reasons people want to get out. This is why they don't care. And that's when it happens, the minute people stop caring. When people want to get out, the seeds of decay are sown, and the neighborhood is doomed.
This and other documentaries made WBZ-TV one of the most award-winning stations in the country. But that wasn't the point. The point was that WBZ-TV cared about the community, cared a great deal about the present and the future of New England. We're 4, Looking Back at 30, continues after these messages.
Governor Peabody.
The 60s. That young senator from Brookline who we had watched for so long became president.
It is a great pleasure to come back to a city where my accent is considered normal. And where they pronounce the words the way they are spelled.
Videotape was in general use. Communication satellites made it possible to telecast worldwide, and color was just around the corner. Suddenly, the news itself turned bad. Very bad. We had grown up with him. We banded together as a family to share our grief. These were times of disillusionment and despair. We were at war again. New England boys were fighting 12,000 miles from home. Newsman Gene Pell and cameraman Dick Smilgas went to Vietnam in '65 to follow 2 Massachusetts boys into that dirty little war.
The world of Robert Jones is the flight deck of the Midway, whipped by gale force winds, filled with flying spray and screaming jet engines. There is never privacy or solitude, and never even for a moment is there silence. The world of Robert Jones was once a paper route, a '57 Ford, and a dog named Duchess. It can never be that again. Late last month, Robert Jones and the USS Midway finished their tour off the coast of Vietnam. The Midway is docked in California, and Robert Jones will be home for Christmas. Joseph Drew will not. His 13 months end in May, and he will spend Christmas here on the sand dunes and rugged mountains around Da Nang. Last night, Drew had 2 hours sleep. He spent the rest of the night prowling a spit of sand, looking for the remnants of a suicide squad that got through the perimeter and blew up 27 helicopters. Joseph Drew has spent 214 days in Da Nang. He has gone on more than 100 sweeps and patrols. He's seen every member of his squad killed or wounded. He thinks he might have killed 1 Viet Cong. If he's lucky, he'll spend Christmas Day here in his battalion's base camp, with the rude comforts of a tent, a cot, and hot food. If he isn't...
PFC Joseph Drew never made it home. He was killed at Da Nang a few days before this documentary went on the air. It was dedicated to his memory. Back home, our minority voices were growing stronger. Lamont Thompson, WBZ-TV general manager from '64 to '68, remembers.
This was a tough era. We had the story of our men fighting in Vietnam. We had the story of our young people here in Boston fighting to get us out of the war. We were having student riots at Harvard. Right next door, over in Soldiers Field, we used to have massive peace demonstrations. We, as a matter of fact, were invaded here in our station by a group of peace protesters. The black community was marching to break out of the ghetto.
Lamont Thompson and other media leaders met again and again with black leaders and came away convinced that minority issues could be most effectively covered by minority reporters. Well-known black newsman Terry Carter joined the staff. It was a beginning.
Sarah Ann Shaw, Walt Sanders came in the late 1960s and have been very heavy blockers for us in this whole field of understanding the problems of race relations in a major market like Boston. Nowadays, of course, some of the great news people on all the stations are black. When I came to Boston in '64, there weren't any, not a one.
By the late 60s, things were looking up, and we were looking up at one of Dr. John Karas's time capsule predictions come true, a few years short of 2000 AD.
And we're getting a picture on the TV. You got a good picture, huh? There's a great deal of contrast in it, but we can make out a fair amount of detail. At the foot of the ladder, the limb footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
How fast our infant industry has grown. Black and white TV seems to be part of the dark ages. Videotape recorders are getting smaller and more portable every year. WBZ-TV introduces the Instant Eye, a portable videotape camera that revolutionizes news gathering with the capability of bringing us live news anytime from anywhere by much the same microwave system used way back in 1948.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
But tastes have changed a lot since then.
Today, television is much more conscious of their news programs than in the old days, when a local news broadcast ran for 15 minutes, and that included news, sports, and weather, and ribbon cuttings, which, ceremonies in which local malls were opened. That was local news.
People have a taste for news. They want to know what's going on. We live in changing times, if not troubled times, and people want to know about it.
People desire to know, and television, reflecting that need, has tried to be more and more immediate in giving people what's going on while it's going on.
People want to know about a lot more things than news can really cover. So WBZ-TV developed a new kind of information show called Evening. And last year, when New England had its first local Emmy Awards, Evening was a winner. But there are some things we wouldn't want to change. New England TV traditions like community auditions, now in its 29th year, hosted since the 60s by Dave Maynard.
The show from the beginning has been rated #1 in its time period. I think without interruption. And I think there's a very good reason for it. I like to say I play, kind of an important part. I don't really. Gene Jones played an important part, who was the host before I took it over. But the most important thing is that people who watch this show realize that could be somebody next door, or even that's me up there. Or I'd like to do that. Or, I think I can sing as well as that person. Or I've been studying guitar, but I think what they see, the show has an empathetic appeal. People who watch it would like to be on it, or wish at one time they had gone on to community. Because I think everybody has some talent in them, whether it's realized or unrealized.
Our passion for baseball is stronger than ever, especially since the magic season of 1975. We loved football in '48, and we love it today. And basketball. And now soccer, another WBZ-TV first. 30 years ago tonight, WBZ-TV fulfilled a dream of being New England's first television station. Thanks, New England.
For your hospitality, thank you, and good night.
Pleasant dreams.
So long, kids. See you next week.
So remember that what the world will be like in the year 2000 AD depends upon the young people of today.
So long, and make it a good day.
And that's my forecast for now.
So long, small fry.
From everyone at WBZ-TV, thank you and good night. And don't forget to stay tuned for the next 30 years.